Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Human-Centered Design UAE Meetup. My name is Jonathan Steingiesser. I'm the founder of the Meetup. We started in Abu Dhabi 12 and a half years ago. And our oldest, one of our founding members is here, Goffredo. Big round of applause. Back in... We'll just start again. Just for the video. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Human-Centered Design UAE Meetup. My name is Jonathan. I'm the Innovation Services Lead at the Early Childhood Authority here in Abu Dhabi. And very excited to welcome you tonight. We've got a really great discussion planned. I'll tell you a little bit about the Meetup and we'll get started. We've been around for 12 years now. Huge thank you to our sponsors. Specs are a specialty recruitment firm in product, design, and engineering. Peter McIntosh, Jack Kidd, they just flew back from the UK. They're normally here, but they send their apologies. They can't make it tonight, unfortunately. They've just launched a new service I wanted to very quickly share with you called Squads, where if you're looking for teams, not just for one individual talented designer, developer, they can bring a squad to wherever you're working, be it a startup or a large enterprise. And yeah, this is something they've seen as a gap in the market. We, as I said, have been around for a while. If it's your first meetup, you can check out our past events. We've got 47 videos since the pandemic. We've been recording the events, so definitely something to share. The quality of the sound might not be great on all of them. That's why tonight, for the first time, praying to the IT gods. That's why we've got Etihad guys here, that it works. We've got our speakers mic'd up, and hopefully the quality will be amazing. We can do some shorts as well. If you're on the socials, then please tag us, both the Specs and HCD. We're on LinkedIn and Instagram. Continue the conversation. If you're looking for work, or even if you're not, I always say writing as much as you can, sharing where you are, adding everyone on LinkedIn, sharing with the community is a great way to be noticed and to find your next opportunity. Huge thank you to Chris, who's going to host tonight. We've just launched a website. It's very, very MVP at the moment. We're going to be doing some research on the site, but not just the site, but on the Meetup in general. So it's just hcd.ae. And at the moment, it's just a page, and we've got our events, but we do want to create a lot more content for you. So we want to hear what you'd like to see on there, and what can help you further as well be connected to the community. It's not just me, there's a lot that happens behind the scenes. Huge thank you. Again, sadly, they are either traveling or are in Dubai and can't make it tonight, but Natalie, Leopold, Chris, who is here and will be hosting, and Nada are the co-organizers of the Meetup, so big thank you. And I just want to tell you quickly, we've got a really great lineup of events before our summer break. Unfortunately, this one is sold out, but you can join the wait list. We're doing something we haven't done before, a debate at the Courtyard Playhouse in Dubai. And we've got two sides. It's guys versus girls. In the motion, AI will lead design? Will it or will it not? So that's going to be interesting. It will be recorded and shared afterward if you can't make it. And then June 12th, we're going to one of our old stomping grounds. We get about a good number of people there, like close to 100. So if you're more interested in the networking and you're looking for work, or you just enjoy networking and having a drink, then come down to Lock, Stock and Barrel, again in Dubai, June 12th. We've got two great speakers, both from the region with a lot of experience in the region. So that brings us to tonight. I've been very fortunate for the last year when I joined the ECA to work with Chris, and together our mission is to bring design thinking, product thinking, as well as any other innovative framework or methodology to not just the ECA, but more broadly to government and also to the private sector to do things a bit differently, to look at what is out there and to simplify it and bring it into being. So I'll pass over to Chris now, who's got a lot of 25 plus years of design experience, and he'll tell you a bit more about himself and tonight's meetup. Chris.
Okay, thanks Jonathan. Great intro as always. Okay, so before we bring our expert in, I'm not going to ever call myself an expert, just experienced. I'm going to start with a very small story. So the reason I wanted to host this event is because, one, I'm a petrol head. I love all things cars, all things vehicles. I've probably crashed most things with 4 wheels or even 2, with the story from the time. But part of my career was I had 4.5 years at Jaguar Land Rover, or JLR as it's referred to normally. So there I was part of the experience design team, it was called, and we focused on designing the infotainment system, so the touch screens that are now predominant in all the vehicles that we now purchase. And during that time, I think it was about 2016, I got my first taste in autonomous vehicles. So within any sort of vehicle manufacturer, you usually have a way to test and research competitors. So we have a competitor fleet. It's quite a nice perk actually. So you go in there and they have all of the competitor vehicles that you're benchmarking against. So for us in the premium sector, it was most of the German stuff, so the BMWs, the Mercedes, the Porsches of the world. And me and my team had booked out 3 cars to take out to test these different features. And now not only was I working on the UI UX for the whole system, I was also, the team was handed out different features to work on, and mine was autonomous parking. So a system where the car will actually park itself. So I grabbed the keys on this day of testing, an evening of testing, to a brand new Mercedes S-Class. Ooh, that was a nice car. The seats massaged you. That was the best drive to work I've ever had. It was miserable outside, and I was like, yep, I could get used to this. So I took this car, took these keys off the table. There was 3 available, much to the annoyance of my manager. He's like, because he knew that was the nicest one to be in. Not the most expensive, but the nicest one. And he said, well, why are you taking that? You know, he's trying to pull around. I said, well, you've asked me to do autonomous parking. This is the only car that we now have in that does autonomous parking. He's like, well, okay. So that evening I went out, got home, had my dinner, went back out in the car, drove it around, and then it was late trying to find a car park with cars in. Because if there's no cars in the car park, why would you use autonomous parking? Because you can just park, anyone can do that. So I eventually found a late night Tesco, I think it was, with about 6 or 7 cars lined up with 1 space in the middle. Perfect. You come up, there's the space, you stop, you turn on the app, on the feature, the sensors pick up that there's a gap there, and then it prompts you, do you want to park here? You go, okay. You press the button, you get some instructions, you take your hands and your feet off all the controls, the wheel spins to life, the car reverses in, it stops and says, you know, action complete. Now back then, now this has become a little bit of the norm, right? But back then, that was like magic. That was like, you know, that's like I'm living Knight Rider from the 80s. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is so cool. Do it again, take my notes, record it, write down what I like about the experience, what I don't. I'm doing all my rapid research and discovery, yeah. Took some friends out as well. You know, look at this, it's amazing. They're all going, oh my God, it's so cool. And every time I use it, I'm getting more confident with this system. And, you know, it becomes normal. This is great. Long story short, the next day, take the car back to work, and me and my manager and my colleague, we have to take it into a secure area on site to give it back to the guy who runs the fleet. And we agreed we'd wait so the guy who organised it could take all the keys in together. So we're kind of waiting for him to come in. He turns up and it's pouring rain. He says, okay, yeah, we need to park it over there, then we can go in. No problem. So I go in first. And I'm driving in, and what do I see? Lines of cars and 1 space on the left. And I thought, perfect. I will use the autonomous parking so that my boss sees I've done my homework, I get all the brownie points, happy days. So I pull up, activate the system, press the button, and I think, how will I do this where he knows that I'm not doing it? Because he'll just think, yep, Chris can park really well. I know he can park really well, my parking's always great. I thought, I roll the window down slightly, put my hands out the window and wave to him with both hands as it goes. And then he'll know the car is parking himself. So I do that, press the button, hands off the steering wheel, hands out the window, feet off the pedals. After I press the button, let's go. Car starts to move backwards. Car's going really quickly backwards. Car's going way quicker than it was yesterday. Wheels not turning. And then my boss, who's parked behind me, because he's stopped, he sees I'm going to park, he's left space. I'm now looking at the mirror directly at him, and his face is going from, what is he doing? Oh, I think I know what he's doing. no, what is he doing? As I come barreling towards him, and the very last second I think, this isn't working, and I throw my feet onto the pedal, and the car screeches to a halt. Straight into the Bentayga behind me. So the Mercedes, £112,000. They always have a sheet that says how much it's worth, because they always tick all the options. We always play guess how much it's worth when you get in the car. You pull the sheet out and go, guess how much. The Bentayga, £220,000. So a combined total, I'm sure you can do the math. I'm like, oh my God. So I put the car in drive, I move forward, enough space. I get out of the car, I walk around, I glance at my boss. My boss hasn't changed from this. I got it. I look down, and it's raining, as I say. I look at that one bumper, I look at this bumper, I wipe them off. I'm like, there isn't a scratch. I can't believe it. I look at him, I go, it's okay. He goes, what is it? They're fine. I run back in the car, I drive forward, I see the space, the app that's still going. Would you like to auto park? And I then test the strength of that screen with the hardest press of a no button it's probably ever had. Park the car, get out, keys, throw it to my other colleague who's also still going, what just happened? And then I go, I'll see you in the office, and I run back. So the reason I told that story is because literally in the space of about 14 hours, I went from, this is the best tech in the world, to I'll probably never use it again in my life, no matter how much of the good they tell it is, because I'm now slightly, scarred by it. So that's my first experience with autonomous vehicles and learning the pros and cons of it. That was a long time ago. Things have moved on. And some people know more about than I do. So, with no further ado, let us bring in our expert. She is, I want to get it right, a strategic product leader and group product manager. It says it there. For SteerAI, which is an autonomous, efficient, sustainable solutions from AI-driven intelligence company. Please give a round of applause for Janna.
Thank you. That was a good story.
Love a good story. Always a great way to start. So, Janna, thank you so much for being here with us. Tell us about your experience, your career. Where did you start? Have you always been in autonomous vehicles since a child? I doubt it.
Not since a child. Yes, so my journey in product started at the end of my PhD in biomedical engineering, not autonomous technology, with what I call as an adventure as a co-founder of an early stage startup. This is where I realized that the dynamic, the interesting nature of problem solving of product is really up my alley, and this is where I really began my product journey. I started off in healthcare, which is really very aligned with my academical background. I did products in health tech and then transitioned to autonomous mobility. I led a product team in Motional in Singapore, which is a self-driving taxi, robotaxi company in Singapore. And recently transitioned, in Motional what I did is human in the loop. I will talk about it a bit later, but essentially it's a critical component where we know a human is required to handle edge cases in autonomy. And recently I transitioned to Abu Dhabi, a leading product for SteerAI, as you mentioned, which is autonomous mobility, a startup born and raised here in the UAE.
Amazing. So you started in medical, but we're far from that now with autonomous vehicles and robo-taxis. I think it sounds cool if you put robo at the start, right? Robo-car, robo-taxis. I think it does. Child of the 80s. What crossovers do you see coming from medical into where you are now with autonomous systems? Like, is there any similarities or similar challenges or things that you've learned from the medical sort of area that kind of apply now?
The overlap in product is actually more than one can assume. So product, in essence, is understanding users' problems and solving for it. So yes, there is a learning curve for every industry, but essentially the fundamental skills are transferable. It's bridging users, technology constraints, and of course, product and business goals. So the position adjusts. It doesn't change, but it adjusts. A really interesting example is a UI UX challenge that I was facing. Just as an example, in health tech, we were doing a product that was streamlining patient and doctors' interactions. Essentially, the goal was to collect medical information, thoroughly collect medical information from patients, and then summarize it nicely to physicians. The goal was twofold. First is the burden from physicians. There is a lot in questioning, a lot of burden in questioning the patient and really remembering and mentioning all the questions that needed. So easing this burden up for physicians, and then the other goal was allowing for asynchronous interactions between the patient and the doctor, which is of course both time and cost effective. So our UI or UX challenge or design experience challenge was how do we collect information, medical information in a good and thorough way, as I mentioned, and summarize it up to the physician. Fast forward to autonomous technology, where I was working on this human in the loop. For human in the loop, we need to provide information to the humans who sit in a back office, essentially, and need to supervise the autonomy technology. And we need to provide this information very quickly and efficiently, and then provide them the tools, the right tools, to make the interventions and help if needed. So the challenge is really similar. It's a lot about providing the right information in the right way. The industry is different, but challenges are very similar.
Interesting. Yeah, I can totally see that. So we're going to delve a bit more into, autonomous vehicles and the different levels of stuff. And before you give us the experts' definition of what those are, I want to do a quick little bit of audience participation very rapidly. So currently, there are 5 levels. You're not allowed to answer because you already know. There are 5 levels, although you did get it wrong. There are 5 levels of autonomous vehicles, okay? So you're ranging from level 0, so that's my 1976 Datsun, that hasn't got power, well, it has power steering now because I added it to it, but it hasn't got anything. It hasn't even got ABS, okay? That is the dumbest vehicle in the world, but it also looks cool. Up to the top level, which is level 5, all right? We're going to explain what they are in a moment, but from your perception, if you were to go and purchase a Tesla today in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, what level of autonomy do you think that car is at on that scale? So, if you think it's a level 0, I'm not even going to ask. If you think it's a level 1, put your hand up. Level 2? So we've got 3 hands there. Level 4? Sorry, did I miss one? Level 3? Okay. 5. Level 4? And then level 5, no level 5. So majority is level 3 and level 4 there, with a few on level 2. So technically, the answer as of today, even though they're constantly pushing things and marketing things, is actually level 2. So, interesting. So yeah, I that often catches people out, so don't feel bad if it does, because that's a lot of the perception, I think, of the marketing, of the brand and stuff. But good you should ask, Ruben, and thank you for coming. Janna, what are the different levels of autonomy?
Thank you for asking this question, Chris. Okay, so when we talk about the levels of autonomy, we usually refer to what we call SAE levels, the Society of Automotive Engineers, level 0 to level 5, as you mentioned. And to determine the level of autonomy, I like to ask ourselves 2 questions. First, do we need to have our hands on the wheel? And second, do we need to have our eyes on the road? So level 0, your car, 1976 car, or 0 to 1, essentially, those really don't have any autonomy. Right, so they sometimes maybe have some cruise control or some indications if we switch lanes unintentionally. So practically, we need to have our hands on the wheel and our eyes on the road. This is 0 to 1. Level 2, this is where we have our adaptive cruise control. So for example, if we get closer to a car, the car would slow down. We sometimes have lane control or lane keeping mechanisms. Sometimes in Tesla, we even have lane changes. But essentially, the driver is still the entity that's responsible for any edge cases. So if something happens or goes wrong, the driver needs to immediately take control. So they don't need their hands on the wheel because the Tesla keeps lanes, but they do need their eyes on the road to make sure that nothing happens. This was level 2, so good job for everyone who's at level 2. Level 3 gets a bit more interesting. So we actually can take our hands off the wheel and our eyes off the road, but for very specific cases, we call it ODD, Operational Design Domains. So for example, we can have our eyes off and hands off on highways, very specific highways that were predefined. And in these locations, the car is responsible for any edge cases and anything that can happen. So the user, the driver, can take their hands off the wheel and their eyes off the road. Zero responsibility. But for very specific use cases, like I mentioned, this highway. And a very critical feature to go from level 2 to level 3 is an indication that the user has to take control back once we're out of these areas, for example. Level 4, no hands, no eyes, no driver. This is where we see the autonomous taxis, for example, like Waymo or Cruise or Motional, where I worked before. This is where we see it driving on the road without a driver. But once again, in very specific ODDs. So there are areas, there are streets where the robotaxi can drive and where it cannot drive. And it's not just areas, it's conditions. For example, rain or fog or other environment or temperature, right? So any type of conditions that defines this ODD. And then there's level 5, which is total autonomy, anytime, anywhere. And of course, this is something that we haven't reached yet.
Thank you. Does that make things a little bit clearer then? So level 5
it's clear.
is, it's fairly far away at the moment. If you think about it, even the Waymos are not up there, and we think of them as fully autonomous, and they are, but to a degree.
Correct. And scaling up is one of the main challenges of those cars. And when we say scaling up, it's mainly about different regions, right? So we said level 4 is for specific regions, and scaling up requires technological advancements and essentially a lot of these things. But Tesla is still a level 2, and everyone thinks it's a level 4. So it's also a lot of good branding to get there.
It makes sense as well when you think about. Yeah, if it's quick. I'm going to try and keep questions towards the end, just because sometimes we get a little bit railroaded, but please go for it.
So is it a matter of regulations, or is it a matter of technology? Because Teslas can do higher levels, but maybe the regulator at different places doesn't allow them to do it.
Yeah, it's a good question. It is definitely a matter of regulation. To switch from level 2 to level 3, you do have to have regulation acceptance. And of course, from level 3 to level 4. But it's also a lot about technology. We don't yet have the scalable technology to expand every city, every street, to expand the ODDs. Not yet, and not in a scalable and fast way. So it's possible.
And that environment's key as well, because you mentioned like motorways, for example. If you think about a motorway, it's very structured, clear markings, 9 times out of 10, well maintained because cars are at high speed. It's your parameters are way more locked in and less, shall I say, versus a single lane country road with no markings in the deep countryside of the UK. Even I struggle to drive around them sometimes. It's tricky. So that's especially when you're using a Tesla, which is camera only. There's a very difficult thing for the system to be able to get all those, things. And we saw that, I talked about this the day with me, the Waymos as well, even though they're some of the most advanced on the road, there was that moment where 5 of them all came to one junction at the same time, and they got stuck for hours because they were after you, sir, no, after you, sir, no, after you, sir.
Yeah.
So, at some point a human, although we do that with doors ourselves, right? At some point one human's going to go, screw this, I'm late, and just plow through, okay? So. With the computers, that's where I'm sure they've probably written something in now to the code, but there's all those kind of unforeseen things that they need to solve. So super interesting. But we're not only talking about autonomous vehicles, are we? Like passenger vehicles. We're talking about autonomous vehicles across other ecosystems. So I know you've done some work in that area as well. So could you talk a bit towards that as well, please?
Yes, of course. So you're right, autonomous technology really spans far beyond passenger cars. And we have a few examples. Autonomous trucks that are mainly designed for highways, for long-haul freight. The environment on highways is usually a bit more predictable, so you have less people jumping in, animals or different types of vehicles. But the fast dynamic is still a challenge to handle with. We also have autonomous buses or shuttles, which you might see on the US if you go visit, by the way. It's a new one. Have you seen it? It's a really cool one. No. You have to go visit.
Maybe
Okay,
next
so,
episode.
so autonomous buses or shuttles usually operate in closer environments like business parks or campuses. So usually those would be slower in a more controlled environment, and we do see a lot of those in different locations. We have new last mile delivery vehicles, which I personally like a lot. I haven't seen those in the UAE yet, but I have seen them in different locations around the world. It's like those little vans, not even a van without the driver, of course, that drive mostly on the curbs and on the sideways to solve for this last mile delivery. Which I personally very much like.
That would also count as drones as well, right? Which Amazon were experimenting with. I'm not sure they still do it, but yeah, the drone deliveries for packages as well.
Yes.
Brand new Nikes straight to your garden.
Did you try those?
No, I do like new Nikes though. If you want to send me some, go right ahead.
Maybe we should try those. Beyond the road, we also have agriculture vehicles, construction vehicles. We have drones, we have marine vessels. So it really spans the entire industry. The interesting thing is that from a market perspective, robotaxis still dominate. We have research, I even have the numbers here. We have research that shows that the global autonomous ride-hailing robotaxis market will reach 160 billion by 2030, 160 billion, and some research even say 800 billion by 2035. So really robotaxis dominate the market, and it makes sense, right? The market share. Question.
Go for it.
I have a question. It's like if it is a human-centered product, are there any measures or metrics in place that policymakers are there in place and you need to abide by those rules?
Do you mean from a this experience perspective, or from?
From the experience, from the on-road perspective, or when you're launching the product, basically.
Maybe I can talk about it a bit later, but just as a rule of thumb, a robotaxi has to behave like a normal car and obey to all rules because it's part of the regular environment and has to answer to a lot of regulations in terms of prove the safety first and foremost. So there is a lot of work around it. Yes.
Do you want to carry on with the topic, or do you want to jump into that one?
No, I'll finish my thought about the numbers because it's really cool. And the numbers. So just to finish the thought about why robotaxi really dominates the space is because it has the potential to really change how we commute. It has the potential to re-architecture how we approach our living and how we navigate ourselves in a city, how we purchase cars, right? So it's really transformational. And this is why a lot of companies bet essentially on robotaxis, including Tesla's or Elon Musk's Tesla.
So earlier on you mentioned a term that I really like, and some of you might have pricked your ears up, which is human in the loop. So you mentioned that within the context of robotaxi, so that's a good segue into that. So could you talk a little bit more to that and explain what that actually means and some of the intricacies of it?
Yes, human in the loop. So just a short recap. A human in the loop is essential and a critical component in every L4, remember L4, autonomous technology. Why? Because AVs and the autonomous capabilities will always handle edge cases. Okay, I won't say always, but for sure in the foreseeable future, we would have edge cases. Edge cases can be a first responder that interacts with a car, or a very complicated construction zone, or different edge cases that we can think about. And for these cases where the autonomy is struggling a bit, we want to provide assistance with the human. This human in the loop has to understand what's going on. So this is where we design for an interface that provides the information from the car to this human that would sit in a command center or a back office somewhere, right? So they need to understand what's going on, why is the car stuck, why is it struggling, and they need to have the tools to help it quickly and efficiently. Because if we don't help the autonomy quickly and efficiently, the passenger and the passenger experience essentially is hurt, and then if we can't solve it remotely, we would have to have a human on site, which is of course costly and very expensive. So this is the human in the loop. And while I was designing, while my users were those remote operators for a human in the loop, we have to remember that essentially the customer is the passenger that sits in the car. And one of the challenges that we were facing is how do we communicate to this passenger that there is a human in the loop? Because the passenger essentially rides in an autonomous robotaxi, and then all of a sudden something happens and they need, the human in the loop has to intervene. And interestingly enough, one of the ways that we approach it is to understand the attention level of the passenger. And maybe not so surprising, but attention levels actually change during the ride. The passengers tend to be more attentive during the beginning of the ride, as they just enter the car, and at the end of the ride, just before they approach their destination. And then mid-ride, they would usually, relax, a bit lay back, probably be on their device, and their attention is a bit lower. And this communication about having a human in the loop can vary along the different segments of the ride. Now, definitely, the communication always has to be transparent, because when the communication is not transparent, the users lose their trust, of course, right? This is not a surprise. But we can kind of gauge how vocal we are about this human in the loop essence during the different aspects of the rides.
So, putting my design head on, it's almost like there's journey maps within a journey map of a journey of a taxi, if that makes sense. Because you're looking at that experience journey from the pickup to the end, but also how that changes as you go through. So I assume there was a lot of research into those moments, into the users, when to intervene, when not to intervene. Can you share some of your key insights from that, or what really stood out?
Yes, definitely. There is a lot of research, and it's really interesting from a human behavior perspective. I think what's most interesting is that when we looked at the passengers' responses on how they perceive this human in the loop, sometimes when the car struggles in what we as humans think is very simple, like a construction zone, we would see the human go, really? The car struggles? You need a human here? It doesn't make sense, right? So we do lose some trust and credibility. And this is where we have to be subtle in our communication to make sure that we communicate there's human in the loop, but try to kind of maintain, the technology is still good enough. You can trust it, even though we need a human in this specific construction zone. So there's a lot of balance to how do we communicate and when. And there's a lot of interesting insights about how passengers perceive this technology. Some things that from a technological perspective would be very simple. The passenger would be surprised that the car managed it, like a lane change. They're like, oh, wow, that was awesome. And sometimes when things seem very, very simple from a technological perspective, it's actually very complicated. So this is where we would get the surprise. So it's a lot of really interesting insights.
And the amount of sort of the cadence of that communication as well in regards to like faith in the service and the brand must be quite critical too. I mean, it's interesting, that perception from a customer. My time in JLR, just a sort of slight segue, but we did a lot of user testing on vehicles of competitors, as I said, but we also did that with our customers. In certain scenarios, we would cover the whole car in black cloth and inside as well, and only really reveal the touchscreen for them to use, so they wouldn't have a bias on the rest of the vehicle around them or the brand that they already knew. So we wanted to really delve down into the actual experience, into the user experience, the UX. Are they finding this easy to use or not? And sometimes that can kind of change your perception as well. Just maybe think of that, quite interesting. But you talked about the experience changing earlier from between the levels, specifically where, as we figured out earlier on, where Tesla is predominantly at level 2 to level 3. What are those kind of main changes between that when we're going up these levels? What's the kind of the key differentiators or the stumbling points?
That's a really good question, and I think it's a really interesting topic to dive into. So let's talk about driver's experience. I have a list of what the literature defines as the different metrics. Maybe it ties back a bit to your question. And how do we measure driver's experience? So trust, okay, this is an easy one, right? We also have cognitive load, usability, satisfaction, situation awareness, comfort, perceived safety, engagement, system, understanding, frequency of use, willingness to pay. A lot of different metrics that we measure, or we use to measure the driver's experience. And when we talk about the experience at the different levels, between level 2 and level 3, we understand that trust is actually a critical component. Why? Because between level 2 and level 3, maybe a bit less than when we compare it to level 4, trust is a driving force in adopting paid components, right? So if our trust is high, we would be willing to pay for autonomous components much more than if our trust is low, which is very expected. And research shows that trust varies with different parameters. For example, with age. So we can imagine that older users would have lower levels of trust versus younger users, for example.
Are you calling me old because of my story earlier? I am old.
Not at all. So this is one interesting parameter. We also know that trust increases as we spend more and more time
On the wheels, yeah. Experience.
with the correct. Oh, now I hear myself much better. Oh my God. Sorry for that. Okay, so we also know that trust increases as we spend more and more time with those vehicles. So as we spend much more time with our Tesla, we trust it a bit more. I also saw a very interesting experiment about a prototype of autonomous technology that is adjusted to our style of driving. So personalized driving styles, of course, increase trust because we can kind of imagine or relate to the driving style of this vehicle. So we really see that trust changes and the manufacturers, the car manufacturers and the companies that design for L2 and L3 have to keep it in mind because this is one of the main drivers to adopting, as I mentioned, technology and specifically the willingness to pay. We have other interesting user experience metrics like cognitive load or perceived safety. So as I mentioned in L2, we still have to have our eyes on, remember, hands off, but eyes on. So it leads to this slight confusion, I would say, because sometimes we don't really know when do we supposed to intervene, right? We mentioned that the user is always responsible for taking charge or taking control if something goes wrong, but sometimes it's confusing, right? Do we let the Tesla handle it, or do we take control now? Or who's in charge now? Is it us, or is it the Tesla? And of course, cognitive load increases, right, with L2. There is a lot of research about L2. There is not so much about L3 because it's not really yet deployed. Mercedes has L3 in some specific highways, but we just don't have enough data for this research. But I'm personally assuming, right, one can challenge those assumptions that both trust and cognitive load and the other user experience metrics would actually go up in L3 because we would not have this confusion. In L3, we know the car is responsible for everything. We don't need to think, do we need to intervene or not? We can just lay back and close our eyes and watch our movie until the car asks us to take control. And same for the trust. If the car is completely capable of, if the regulator, right, trusts the car to be able to navigate in a specific region, the trust increases. So those metrics really change between L2 and L3. And it's really, I think it's much more important to the companies from a commercial perspective, unlike L4, because this is exactly what, as I mentioned, drives adoption. So yes, so this is a bit about experience in L2 and L3.
So again, back with my design hat on, this is almost like the very advanced stuff that I had to work on for JLR, working on just the touchscreen systems and the your clusters and your displays. We had a whole team actually called the Human Machine Interface Team, HMI, and they kind of had this golden set of rules. So we weren't allowed to have font sizes below a certain size because then it's harder to read. And if you're doing this and you can't read the screen, your eyes are off the road. So eyes off road time was important. Where we position the screen in the car, if it's down here, glare, day and night modes are coming to that as well. You know, if you look down here, this is why if you ever driven, which is still, I mean, I think the technology is getting, as it does, it's getting smaller and more affordable. But if you've ever driven a car with a hood, a head-up display that sits within the screen, or the windscreen, it is the best thing in the world. I would rather have that than a touchscreen in my car, because then your focal point is from here to here, not from here to here. And that shift of depth from here to here takes a real cognitive load to be able to go, okay, then to go back to what you're looking at. So we had a lot of these things in place to make sure that we're not making that experience difficult for the user, and to really minimize that sort of eyes off road time. But the funny thing was, for my main project of white sheet of paper, the UX of the system to begin with, was we had a interior design strategy that was like minimize everything. We want minimal, we want a sanctuary of calm in this luxurious interior. Let's get rid of all the switches. So they kept reducing more and more and more, and I think the last version of the Range Rover is where the customer base now has gone back and said, whoa, bring back our HVAC or heating and controls, at least give us those back, because the design director, interesting chap, ask me more about him later if you want, he's, he wants that minimal look, and from an aesthetics perspective as a designer, I'm like, yeah, I get what you're saying, it's super minimal, super cool. But then when you lose those haptics, you lose that sort of like that muscle memory. I can just reach down, that's hot, that's cold, I can do this. And you end up going, all right, where's that thing? So they start putting all these things into the screen because they've taken them out of the physical side of things. So then it was my job to push back and say, eyes off road time is critical. And they're like, but we've got 50 systems we want to work with. It's like, for me, it was like, no. When you're driving a car, if you're sat down in a car park waiting for someone to come out of a building, then do whatever you want. Go crazy, play Pac-Man or whatever. But if you're driving a car, reduce it down, make it the most minimal core functions that you need to do. So for me, it was, where are you going? I want to listen to something or call somebody. I've forgotten the third one. What was it? No. Where are you going? Navigation. I want to call someone. Yeah, I want to listen to music. That was it. Media, phone, and navigation. Simple. And you would not imagine the months of arguments I had with the rest of the business, because they all own cars, they can all drive, and they're all help building cars, and it's a huge, this huge company. They all know best, And then the chief engineer of all of JLR passed me his phone and said, just make it like my phone. Why couldn't it be like my phone? So I gave him my phone and said, okay, go in there and send me a message. He went, I don't know where your messages are exactly. Cars are given to other people. They're rented. Different people get in and out. And he was like, It's like, right, okay. So, so yeah, it's like, but again, it's just good design, isn't it? Simplify things down into the core things that need to be done, and try to get rid of some of that noise. But it seems to me, from those golden rules we were looking at, as you go up to autonomous stuff, it's getting more and more complex. And as you specifically said before, it's like certain things that we all know, like AI and computers are great at, that the humans are terrible at, taking lots of information down and making it simple. Other things humans are great at and computers struggle, It's only now that we're seeing these robots that can do flips and jumps really well. So earlier on, you said you were working in robotaxis earlier in your career, but not now. So my question is, if it's not taxis with end users being us, the potential customer or the passenger, what are the end users you're actually designing for at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good question. So today I'm working for SteerAI, as I mentioned, and we do autonomous technology for logistics and defense. And our goal is actually a bit different. We increase efficiency, we increase safety, and of course decrease costs. Right, so on a high level, it makes a lot of sense. But my users, or the ones who would be using this technology, would be actually fleet managers or operation managers. So it's not the passenger who sits in the car. So cognitive load is not a factor, or trust is, but not the same. It's not measured the same way. And of course, it's a different experience, right? It's really how can we make sure that this fleet manager operates a fleet of autonomous vehicles easily, and how can they see the value that we bring? How do we reduce the number of trucks that are used in a port, for example, but still manage to do the same tasks? So how do we increase efficiency, as I mentioned? So the experience is different, but the interest level is still high.
That reminds me of last week when we were at the AI conference in Dubai. There was the chief technology officer from Amazon there, and he did some insights into how AI is being integrated into what they do, and obviously for a long time now. And one of the things that I never realized is that with the deliveries, they're updating their delivery trucks on the fly to optimize their routes. So it's not just a case of in the morning they get in and go, right, I'm going to go from A to B to C to D to E to F. You think that would be planned? That's fairly obvious, you think, to be efficient, right? Don't do your first package in Abu Dhabi, your second one in Dubai, and your third one in Abu Dhabi. That's a waste of fuel. Exactly. But they're actually going to another level with that, where they do it on the fly. So information coming in, maybe even weather and stuff. I think he said it was all sorts of different levels to it, where AI is like helping, streamline that whole process right till the fact it gets to your door, which is super, super interesting. So within that space, though, there must be, even though there's not a traditional end user, there must be some challenges, design challenges that you're facing to try and get that optimization for those users you're looking at now.
Definitely. And by the way, a lot of those design challenges are actually not in the autonomy itself. It's in the fleet management system that needs to optimize for routes or for fleets, et cetera, et cetera. So while we still have a lot of autonomy challenges, we also have different challenges in the interface that we provide to those fleet managers, for example, or operation managers. So it's a lot of different problems that we're facing with the technology, with the autonomy technology, but not always.
So we're going to start kind of bringing this into land now, autonomously. I see a lot of AI getting thrown into lots of products right now, like everywhere, to the point where it's almost like, it feels like a marketing buzzword. You can literally buy a washing machine with AI, and I saw the advert for it the week. And for the life of me, and this does prove I'm old, I just think, why? Like, what's it going? How can it optimize my washing once it's in the machine? Like, how does it do that? What is it? How does it bring? Do you think this AI is bringing value to bringing value to everywhere? Do you think it is? Do you think it can, or do you think there are instances now where it's a little bit, it's a buzzword and trying to just market off it?
Yeah, it's definitely a buzzword, and I'm very interested to ask the tech engineer of these washing machines, what exactly do you use AI for? But I think, taking a step back, tech, AI, and everything needs to bring value to the users, right? This is where I started as a product. How do we bring value to the users? And surveys say that actually most of the consumers are not yet ready to buy AVs because of trust, because of all the misconception, because of the Waymos that are stuck in a junction, although the Waymos would not necessarily be the autonomous cars that we would purchase. So I think it's really important to keep in mind that whatever AI we're using has to bring value, and we know we can measure this value. We listed a few parameters, right? Like the willingness to pay that is correlated to cognitive load and simplicity and user experience, et cetera, et cetera. So I think my main takeaway from this AI as a buzzword is let's measure the value and the impact that we add when we add AI, whatever it is.
That also, great view. I totally agree on that. Measuring what we're doing across anything. Doesn't have to be AI stuff. Any projects we're doing, if you don't measure, then how do you know if you've moved the needle? How do you know what you're doing is actually working? And then the great line from I should really know his name, shouldn't I? He's the CTO of Amazon, was which we both remembered this. Jonathan, when afterwards we both looked at him and we're writing that down, was that when AI starts to work seamlessly and we don't notice it anymore, then it's no longer AI. It just is. Think about that from technologies that maybe aren't AI going back in the day, but once they just become, accepted that works, that how it is, a phone or whatever, right? It's like you don't think of that as this mystical buzzword of, oh my God, it's cyber or whatever it might be. I mean, there you go. There's a perfect example. Cyber. Everything was cyber, right? When the internet started, and cyber this, cyber that, and now we don't really use it as much because it's kind of just, well, that's just the world. That's just how technology is right now. So this is penultimate question, which is kind of try and head off anyone who might ask it, because we always get these sorts of questions in any topic that's to do with AI. But do you see AI taking the roles and jobs from humans? I, for one, welcome our evil robot overloads, just in case. Get that in there. What do you think?
Yeah, that's always the question that we get. I definitely don't think AI will take the jobs from humans, but I know that those who cannot use AI efficiently will not have the advantage of the workplace. So I don't think AI will replace us, but we definitely need to use it in our advantage, to keep our personal advantage.
Absolutely. And finally, where do you see the future of the space, of AI or autonomy, coming back to vehicles, whether it's robotaxis or whether it's more the ecosystems, the logistics deliveries? Do you think it'll ever really get up to that level 5 or levels? Mm-hmm. Level 5. I always want to say level 6 because 0 is technically a level. So yeah, I almost got away without doing it. Do you think it'll ever get to level 5 and have mass adoption?
I believe it's not a question of if, but a question of when. And I don't know when. I don't think anyone knows when. But I see the space. I know the market. I know the competitors. And I know the space is progressing. Now, the progress is slow, right? And sometimes we have falls, and sometimes it backtracks, and sometimes it's slower. But we see more and more autonomous technology deployed in more and more aspects of our life, right? Trucks, not yet, but we see some competitors there. Last mile deliveries, drones, vessels. We see players in those markets, and those players actually grow from year to year. So I don't think it's a question of if, but a question of when. Every 5 years, I would say, in 5 years, we would have all cars autonomous. And then in 5 years, I would still say in 5 years. So, yeah.
Yes, we know the man who keeps saying that, but let's see if he's still there soon. So thank you so much, Janna. Over to you guys. There were some good questions there during. Who's the guy who was going to ask me 8 different ones? Well, let's save applause till afterwards. Let's go for questions. Of course you can. Let's go right applause. Thank you, Janna, for your time. Super great. Any questions? I'll even pass the mic over so you can really be heard. Go for it.
Thank you. First question is, considering the pace of change today, how can be the rapid product scaling dealt?
So just make sure I understand, how can we scale rapidly in...
How do we deal with the rapid scaling of the product?
In terms of deployment, or
in terms
how
of product launch again? And
yeah.
I don't know, my brain is technical in product launch. And this question is for you as well. When you spoke about, when you were speaking about how you dealt with the machine, mm-hmm. and because you are also in innovation, right? So this question is also for you, basically.
Product launch.
So how do we launch more products in rapidly? How do we, maybe I misunderstand.
She means as a spectator, like someone who is learning it newly, how can she, how can a person understand this, how fast you guys are scaling as an AI?
Okay, so my interpretation of that is, scaling, if you go back to basics with anything that you're scaling, right? So the process has to start small because you can't start big in anything. So this doesn't matter whether you're talking AI products or anything, it's any kind of a design process. You need to first understand the problem you're trying to solve, whatever that might be. You need to have your research to know what that problem is, and what the cause of that problem is, or where it comes from, and what the current state is. And then you need to go away, frame that idea, and look for those opportunities around that problem statement and the research that you've found. Okay, what are you finding that you're trying to deal with here, trying to solve, trying to build? And then you have a current state and you have something you're aiming for, and then you need to move into your MVP. Then you need to start small and test. So if we have an assumption that we can do an AI watch that's going to, comb my hair for me in the morning. That's my idea, no one's stealing it. Then you go and you MVP that in the most simple, basic, fastest way that you can. And then you test that with people, whoever those end users might be, and you get data back from that, and you compare to the current state, or you're moving the needle forward, and then you reiterate. And that's what some call a double diamond. There's a few different ways of talking about this. And that process, that iterative process, is how you're going to then eventually scale it. Because if you try and scale to begin with, and go big to begin with, it's much harder to track, to understand, to get that data back, to really know whether you've moved the needle and whether it's working. So you still start small, and you can do multiple prototypes. It could be the same thing again and again, where you iterate version 1, version 2. It could be a different prototype, something completely different, go from a different perspective. So that's kind of the way I would go about it.
I remember when I wrote this question, when you spoke about, the argument you had with your team, when, what...
too many features.
Yes, too many features. How less features would, benefit the product launch. So that time I had, coming from an innovation consultant, that you were asking as less features as possible. How can this be dealt at the time of other product launch, when you see that, the world is, upscaling, each product you see around is upscaling? So
in that instance, it wasn't about less features. It was about optimizing the experience so that it's best as it can be for the user. We kept getting more features added in all the time. We had one for the Range Rover. So the back of a Range Rover, the boot goes down, it's a split tailgate. So the back end goes down, and you can sit on the back of it, and you're watching your polo match. Nod to my lovely manager in the back there, who loves polo. There was an experience they came up with from the engineers, where you can control the music from obviously the front of the car through speakers into the back, and they called it tailgate experience. And they're like, this is amazing, Probably 5 people in the world have used this tailgate experience, but they were like, it's great, it has to go in there. But this is my point earlier, it doesn't need to be on the home screen. It can be a few menus down. You're parked, you're sat by a polo match, you're not driving the car. But another side of that, which was a challenge to begin with, was we were also designing for dual brands. So we were designing for Jaguar and for Land Rover. And they had the same system, but they're 2 very different use cases. If you're in a new Defender, off-road capable, rugged, versus a Jaguar F-Type, sports car, fast, you might take it to the track. The marketing team are like, well, we want to sell a sports car, and the infotainment graphics and the systems and the apps that are on there are right forefront in the marketing brochures as well. So it's kind of like, to them, it's like, you're taking this ammunition away from us because we want it to be custom to that. And I said, no problem. So we kept those 3 panels at the beginning, 3 different main use cases. But if you swipe to the right, each of those different types of cars will be preloaded, and you can change this as well. If you want to make it like my phone, as the engineer said, you can change it, can customize it. Then on the Defender, you swiped, and it was 3 panels all to do with off-roading, weight depth, articulation, and suspension controls for different ride heights and off-road controls. So now you swipe that because suddenly you're in a position where I'm going off-road. Now everything I'm looking at is what I need for that purpose. And likewise for the sports car, you'd swipe across, and then you have a G meter, a lap time counter, and something else that I can't remember what it was. Oh no, it was like the different sports settings for suspension, exhaust, handling, all those sorts of things. So you can, and that's one movement, And then if you're only using that car for track, you can make that your home screen. So it's always there. And then so that's the kind of where I think the creativity comes in, is to solve that problem, and try and, which is not always easy when you're talking to different audiences and different stakeholders. But that's how I kind of came around it. So every time, and I preempted that as well. So when they came to me with that problem, I was like, well, I've got an answer for you. And they were like, oh, I really like that. And then they used those screens in the marketing brochures to help sell the cars as well. So hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
This gentleman over here.
Yes. I have 2 questions.
One. No, I'm joking.
Well, say I've got the first one.
Okay.
And make sure it's a question.
Okay. A question for you. What is one area where you see autonomous experiences will have the least friction to be adopted into our everyday lives while adding the most value here in Abu Dhabi?
Great question.
It's
That
a
is a
watch
good
that combs
one.
your hair.
Yeah.
I told you, I've already done that. Next.
I actually here in Abu Dhabi, my personal challenge is that I have to drive anywhere, everywhere, because public transportation is very limited. So from my personal experience, I would definitely enjoy a robotaxi deployed here across the entire area of Abu Dhabi. We do have a robotaxi here in Yas, once again, for those who are familiar, not just a robobus, also a robotaxi.
Across all Yas or just a specific?
So it's a good question because as I mentioned, robotaxis go on ODD, specific areas, and it has specific drop-off and pick-up locations. So you can go from, I don't know, Warner Bros. To Yas Mall, for example. But if you want to go from your home in whatever it is to a different location in Abu Dhabi, this is still impossible at the moment. So definitely the most value-bringing thing autonomous in Abu Dhabi would be cars. The next thing would be drones delivery for Nike sports sneakers.
Drones?
Other brands are available.
Oh, no advertisement.
Isn't the way doing that like the drone thing in some areas? Not right.
I heard they were, but or they've
Not
tested it
familiar,
potentially.
yeah.
MVP.
Silicon Oasis.
They're doing drone delivery?
They have a
Amazon.
Amazon,
Yeah.
right?
Amazon is doing
Dubai
That's
Silicon
That's a
Oasis.
fulfillment center they're experimenting there.
For food delivery or is this
Amazon products.
just Amazon?
Food delivery is not a bad one. Although if it goes wrong, it could be raining katsu chicken curry or something. I mean, that's not good. Although free meal, right? Just drive it
Just
out.
open your mouth.
Yeah, summer food.
But what about the flying taxis now from Abu Dhabi to Dubai?
Yeah, I hear it. I really wonder how long will they have their money back? Like, what's the ROI? How
exactly.
much, How much development effort would it take to get any commercial
Are they
traction?
autonomous?
According to what I hear, yes.
Okay.
One is, I have a friend of mine who worked for Coventry University, and he was testing. He was doing a lot of early conceptual stuff for that. I think he's moved on to something else now, but that was a few years ago as well. So they definitely looked at it, and someone did do an unmanned flight. A manned flight that was autonomous, I believe, as a testing thing, like Guinness World Records type of thing as well. And there's another one that's been tested in the US as well. I know here they were trying to put it on, but I always go back to thinking of show my age again, like watching the Jetsons cartoon, and it's like everyone's always like flying cars, right? People are obsessed with flying cars because they think that's the solution. You sat in traffic, you look up, there's all that space, and you go, why can't I just be up there? Just go.
Yeah.
But there's a big but here. Think about a drone, all right? Have you ever heard even a medium-sized drone, how much noise that makes? To lift a human off the ground, it's exponentially more, and that's to lift one human off the ground. So again, any sort of form of transportation that's efficient needs to move more than one person. Otherwise, again, that ROI is extremely expensive and rich, which is probably why they're trying it here first. So there's an issue there as well. Of I think if they ever do it, it kind of does need to be autonomous, or it needs to have a huge amount of AI and backup systems, because it's hard enough to get a driving license, as it should be, because machines are dangerous. But that's a pilot's license now on top of that, right? So now moving in, the Y and the X and the Z, and it's like who knows who says where you can go where and when? It's air traffic control. So
That's what they're starting with deliveries. Everybody's talking about starting deliveries.
Yep.
Because you talk with human, then they're first.
exactly.
Yeah.
But even then,
It will be human.
yeah.
The
So
first thing will be all-
and if you extrapolate forward, imagine the drone delivery works, and then drones become super cheap to produce. So now we've got millions of them, and then it's going to be like having giant mosquitoes everywhere. It's going to be everywhere. I mean, is that going to be nice? I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, it's we complain about the Amazon and how quick it is to get stuff, but then we all use it, as proven by that.
It's only because we're old.
Well, yeah. Again, maybe the youngsters will prefer that because I can get a free, or I can go in a robo taxi in the sky.
Exactly.
It's noisy, but I also get there in 2 minutes. So, and I'm sat in my car in traffic going like, kids.
But I'm confident we'll get there. I don't know when, but I'm confident we'll get there.
I think we will, but I think as always, it's never a
Yeah.
full thing, is it? It'll be at the right places and the right times. I think we had one more question at the back, and then we can go back to some wonderful networking. Yes, sir. Do you want the mic? Go for it.
Do you have any material or any?
No, it's on. Just hold it close.
Do you have any materials or resources in order to predict the advancements of AI, especially self-driving car, such as Moore's law? Do you know what is Moore's law?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it any techniques, any things to predict the models? Because it is very important for us in order to know, for example, when we will achieve the level 5 of self-driving cars or something like that.
Do you want to take that one?
Me? I'll try.
Thanks.
I'm familiar, of course, with the Moore's law about the doubling of or halving the speed. I think there are different versions of that. I'm not familiar personally with any predictions on when will we have L5 technologies. I also think this would be very difficult because the technology changes exponentially, essentially. But still, I'm not familiar with any materials on prediction. But as I mentioned, we see the market, which for me is a very strong indicator because we have a lot of commercial traction about the different types of autonomy. So it's not necessarily L5, it's about having autonomous trucks for agriculture or any other types of markets and industries. So I don't have a prediction, right? I don't think it's something that's out there, but I know the market indicates it gets there, it will get there.
That's the main thing that will drive it, won't it? It's demand and the chase of efficiency, and agriculture's a great one. You can totally imagine a combine harvester doing a field on its own, right?
Yeah.
Although I think there's some things within that after watching Clarkson's farm that make farming more difficult than we think. But yeah, okay. If you do have more questions, I know you do. We're going to wrap it up there because we have to. Otherwise, we'll be here all night, and some of us have to drive to Dubai. But we're still going to network. We can still talk. We can still ask questions, and we'll be around for a while after this. So let's continue that conversation. But thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you to our expert, Janna.
Thank you, Chris.
Couldn't do it without her. She's the expert, not me.
Lovely
Thank you so much,
conversation.
and yeah, thanks for coming. And follow us on the socials, and hope to see you at the next event if you can make it. Thank you.